We spend most of our days swimming in noise. Between the endless lists of tasks, the constant distractions, and the exhausting effort it takes to manage how we appear to everyone else, modern life often feels like a marathon we can never finish. Beneath all that rushing is a quiet, comfortable fiction, the idea that there will always be more time. We act as if our days stretch on indefinitely, and that death is a distant event that only happens to other people in other places. But ancient philosophers suspected something else was happening behind the scenes. They argued that our frantic attempts to fill every waking moment are active defense mechanisms. We stay distracted because the alternative is sitting in silence with the absolute certainty that our time here will end. Ironically, avoiding that single, unavoidable truth is exactly what keeps us trapped. By running from our own mortality, we lock ourselves into a perpetual, exhausting performance and miss out on actually living the life we have. To understand why we do this, we can look at a 1973 book by cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker called The Denial of Death. Becker argued that the awareness of our own mortality is the hidden engine driving almost all human behavior. He coined a term for our cultural systems and personal ambitions: immortality projects. As this visual model illustrates, we build towering structures of civilization, chase wealth, and obsess over our legacy to cover up a single foundation. These structures offer a psychological promise, tricking us into feeling that we are part of something permanent. These projects are an elaborate way to ignore our biology. Becker pointed out a harsh reality. Human beings possess extraordinary consciousness and capacity, yet we are physical creatures who will, inevitably, return to the dirt. Building these elaborate shields comes at a high psychological cost. When we spend our lives desperately trying to guarantee a symbolic immortality, we generate immense anxiety. We end up wasting our limited years chasing the wrong things, for the wrong reasons, simply to avoid feeling fragile. The cure to this modern exhaustion requires doing the exact opposite of what our instincts scream at us to do. We have to stop running from our mortality, turn around, and look right at it. Looking directly at death is a practice that traces back to ancient Rome. The Romans understood the danger of success, and they created a deliberate ritual to interrupt the illusion of immortality right at the peak of human glory. When a victorious general paraded through the streets to the roar of adoring crowds, a slave stood directly behind him in his chariot. Amidst the cheering, the slave would repeatedly whisper into the general's ear, "Memento Mori, remember that you will die." The ritual was not meant to humiliate the conqueror or ruin his victory. It was designed to keep him grounded, a stark reminder that the crowd's adoration is temporary, that power fades, and the greatest military triumph cannot save him from the exact same fate as every farmer and beggar in the empire. Death is the great equalizer. This practice of keeping mortality in plain sight carried through the centuries. During the Renaissance, painters filled canvases with skulls, hourglasses, and wilting flowers, images known as vanitas, from the Latin word for emptiness, to remind viewers of the temporary nature of earthly life. But it was the Stoic philosophers, like Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who refined this idea. The Stoics went further than simply accepting death. They institutionalized it into a scheduled daily contemplation. Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." For the Stoics, holding death close was never a source of morbid despair. It was a practical tool to regain perspective and reclaim their autonomy. To build this into a practical routine, the Stoics developed specific mental exercises. The first is the morning reflection. You take the endless timeline of your future plans and visually shrink it down to a single year. You begin your day with one filter. If this were my last year, is what I'm doing today what I would choose? Applied regularly, this strips away tasks and worries that hold no real value. Then there is the evening review. The philosopher Seneca practiced this by looking back over his day and asking what time he had wasted and what he had used well. The goal is not self-punishment, but recalibration. By examining your life in small, daily increments, you catch the drift before it requires massive correction. Another technique is negative visualization. You take a moment to imagine that the people you love are no longer here. You feel what their sudden absence would mean in your life. Then you open your eyes and look at them with that knowledge fresh. It eliminates complacency and forces an intense, immediate gratitude. The Stoics referred to this resulting state of mind as amor fati, the love of fate. When you deeply recognize your time as finite, an ordinary Tuesday morning or a simple cup of coffee stops being something you rush through to get somewhere else. The moment becomes precious entirely because it will eventually end. These daily interventions act as a protective barrier. They ensure that small grudges and trivial arguments do not steal the only unreplaceable resource you were ever given, your time. When you practice Memento Mori genuinely, it offers a distinct psychological relief. It can reduce the exhausting pressure to perform for others. The years we spend chasing approval and managing our image lose their gravity when measured against the physical reality of death. The fear of embarrassment begins to look like a distraction once the finish line is in sight. Looking at this shared mortality reveals a stark imbalance. Why devote your limited hours to performing for an audience destined for the exact same fate? When that imaginary audience loses its influence, things get quiet. You are left alone with your authentic priorities, forced to confront what you actually love and what kind of person you want to be. The tragedy of our condition lies in spending the years between now and then as if they were infinite. We live as if the people we care about will always be there, and as if the things that matter to us can always wait until tomorrow. You do not need a philosophy degree, and you do not need to keep an ancient artifact on your desk to do this. You only need to stop burning energy to avoid the fundamental truth of your own biology. Let the reality of your limits actually land. Then, take a deep breath, look at the time you have left, and ask yourself, given that this is finite, what do I want to do with today?